Two countries separated by a narrow causeway and 60 years of complicated history are locked in Southeast Asia's most important rivalry. Singapore, the gleaming city-state that became the world's wealthiest nation through sheer strategic brilliance. Malaysia, the resource-rich neighbor with 450 times Singapore's land area and unlimited growth potential. For decades, this wasn't even a competition. Singapore's GDP per capita is $90,674, making it the seventh wealthiest country globally. Malaysia's is $11,867, ranking 81st. Singapore is richer, more efficient, more developed. The obvious winner, right? But here's what makes the next decade fascinating. The game is changing, and Malaysia's advantages might finally start to matter more than Singapore's efficiency. In this video, we're analyzing 7 critical factors that will determine who wins the 2025 to 2035 decade. From demographics to debt, from space to sustainability, we'll reveal why this rivalry is far closer than the current GDP gap suggests. By the end, you'll understand why Malaysia might pull off Asia's biggest upset, or why Singapore will prove once again why smart beats big and resource-rich. Let's break down the rivalry reshaping Southeast Asia. Round 1. Economic growth rate, Malaysia's momentum. Singapore grew 4.4% in 2024. Impressive for a developed economy. Malaysia grew 5.1%, and this isn't a one-year fluke. Malaysia has consistently grown faster than Singapore for the past 5 years, and projections show this continuing through 2030. Singapore is a mature, wealthy economy, explains economist Dr. Tan Wei Ming. Growth comes from incremental improvements at the frontier of productivity. Malaysia is still catching up. They have massive untapped potential. A 10% productivity gain in Malaysia creates more growth than a 10% gain in Singapore because they're starting from a lower baseline. The math matters. Singapore's GDP is $547 billion, but growth is plateauing. Malaysia's GDP is $422 billion with room to expand. Singapore is reaching the limits of what a 728 square kilometer city-state can achieve. Malaysia has 330,000 square kilometers to develop. But raw growth means nothing if you're starting far behind. Winner. Malaysia takes this round on momentum, but Singapore leads on absolute wealth. Round 2. Innovation and execution, Singapore's dominance. This is where Singapore crushes Malaysia repeatedly. Singapore ranks 5th globally in innovation, 1st in economic freedom, consistently tops ease of doing business indexes. Government efficiency is world-class. Corruption is virtually non-existent. Malaysia ranks 50th in economic freedom, struggles with corruption perception, ranked 57th globally, and has bureaucracy that frustrates businesses. Policy consistency varies with political changes. Singapore executes flawlessly, admits Malaysian business consultant Ahmad Karim. Permits take days, not months. Regulations are clear and enforced fairly. The gap in institutional quality is why Singapore wins despite Malaysia's natural advantages. This execution gap is existential. Malaysia announces grand plans, then implementation drags for years. Singapore announces plans, then delivers ahead of schedule and under budget. This difference compounds annually. Winner. Singapore dominates on innovation, execution, and institutional quality. Round 3. Space and natural resources, Malaysia's permanent advantage. Geography is destiny, and Malaysia's geography is vastly superior. Singapore is 728 square kilometers, smaller than New York City. Malaysia is 330,411 square kilometers, 454 times larger. Singapore has 0 natural resources. Malaysia has oil, gas, palm oil, rubber, timber, and rare earth minerals. Singapore built wealth through brains because we have nothing else, admits James Wong, Singaporean analyst. Malaysia has everything nature provides: resources, space, biodiversity. If they ever match our execution capability, they're unstoppable. As global focus shifts to resource security, supply chain resilience, and sustainability, Malaysia's natural endowment becomes strategically critical. Singapore must import everything: food, water, energy. Malaysia exports what Singapore needs. Winner. Malaysia. Geography is permanent, and Malaysia's is incomparably better. Round 4. Demographics. Malaysia's young population. Singapore's population is 6 million with the world's lowest birth rate, 0.97 children per woman. By 2040, one-third of Singaporeans will be over 65. Healthcare and pension costs will explode while the working-age population shrinks. Singapore depends entirely on immigration to maintain workforce size. Malaysia's population is 33.5 million with a 1.7 birth rate. The population is younger, growing naturally, and provides a domestic market scale Singapore can never achieve. Malaysia has 20-plus years before facing Singapore's demographic crisis severity. Singapore's demographic cliff is existential, warns Dr. Lisa Chun, demographer. You can't innovate your way out of population collapse. Malaysia has time to prepare. Singapore is already in crisis. Demographics determine everything: consumer markets, workforce availability, innovation capacity, tax-based sustainability. Over a decade, this difference compounds dramatically. Winner, Malaysia. Young, growing populations beat aging, shrinking ones. Round 5. Economic diversification, Malaysia's resilience. Singapore's economy concentrates on financial services, trade, and high-tech manufacturing. If global finance crashes, Singapore crashes. Malaysia's economy spans manufacturing, agriculture, resources, Islamic finance, tourism, and services. If one sector struggles, others compensate. Singapore is optimized for efficiency through specialization, explains economist Dr. Priya Sharma. Malaysia spreads risk through diversification. Neither strategy is wrong, but in uncertain times, diversification protects better. Singapore's concentrated efficiency worked brilliantly in a stable, globalized world. But deglobalization, trade wars, and geopolitical tensions threaten specialized economies dependent on global flows. Malaysia's messy, diversified economy absorbs shocks better. Winner, Malaysia. Economic resilience beats efficiency in unstable times. Round 6. Debt and fiscal sustainability, the hidden crisis. Here's a shock. Singapore's government debt is 174.9% of GDP, fifth highest globally. Malaysia's is 70.1%, ranking 55th. Wait, isn't lower debt better? Not necessarily. Singapore's debt is strategic, borrowing at near-zero rates to invest in infrastructure generating returns exceeding borrowing costs. It's sophisticated financial engineering that works in stable conditions. But Singapore's strategy has a vulnerability. If interest rates rise or confidence falters, 174% debt to GDP becomes catastrophic. Malaysia's debt is less sophisticated but safer, providing more flexibility if economic shocks hit. Over the next decade, fiscal flexibility might matter more than fiscal engineering, notes financial analyst Sarah Tan. Singapore's debt works until it doesn't. Malaysia's debt is simply safer. Winner, draw. Singapore's debt is smarter but riskier. Malaysia is less sophisticated but more sustainable. Round 7. Future vision. Who's preparing better? Singapore's vision for 2030 to 2035 focuses on becoming a global Asia node, connecting East and West, maintaining finance hub status, dominating high-tech manufacturing. They're doubling down on what works. Malaysia's vision is more ambitious. Achieve high-income developed nation status. Lead in Islamic finance and halal industry. Become the preferred China Plus One manufacturing destination. Develop Johor Singapore's special economic zone. The Johor Singapore SEZ is the wild card. If successful, it could blur the rivalry into partnership. Singapore's capital and expertise with Malaysia's space and labor. Both win. If it fails due to political tensions, the rivalry intensifies. The next decade isn't zero-sum, suggests geopolitical analyst Robert Thompson. Singapore and Malaysia are increasingly interdependent. Both can win, or both can lose together. The verdict: who actually wins? After analyzing 7 critical factors, here's the scorecard. Malaysia wins: growth momentum, natural resources, demographics, economic diversification, 4 points. Singapore wins: innovation/execution capability, institutional quality, 2 points. Draw: debt and fiscal sustainability, 0.5 each. On paper, Malaysia has more winning factors. But here's the catch: Singapore's 2 advantages, wealth and execution, might outweigh Malaysia's 4 advantages. Because wealth funds everything else, and execution determines whether potential becomes achievement. The most likely outcome? Singapore maintains absolute wealth superiority, but Malaysia closes the gap. By 2035, Singapore might reach $120,000 GDP per capita, while Malaysia reaches $25,000. Malaysia wins on relative improvement and growth. Singapore wins on absolute wealth and quality of life. Both succeed, just differently. But there's a scenario where Malaysia genuinely wins. If they fix governance, reduce corruption, and execute with consistency. Malaysia with Singaporean-level execution would be unstoppable, combining resources, space, population, and competence. That potential terrifies Singapore. Conversely, if Malaysia continues institutional weakness while Singapore maintains excellence, the gap widens despite Malaysia's natural advantages. Execution matters more than endowment. The partnership scenario. The Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone represents a third path, integration instead of rivalry. Singapore gets space for expansion. Malaysia gets investment and expertise. Both benefit from combining Singapore's capital with Malaysia's land. If this succeeds, asking who wins becomes irrelevant. Both win through cooperation. If it fails, the rivalry continues with both competing independently. We want to hear from you. Which country do you think wins the next decade? Are you betting on Singapore's proven excellence or Malaysia's untapped potential? If you've lived in both, which did you prefer and why? Share your predictions in the comments. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on Southeast Asia's most important rivalry, smash that like button and subscribe.